Kelly, thank you, and everybody in attendance, thank you for making the decision to take your valuable time and attend this webinar. We're going to make it worthwhile. It's not going to be a slide presentation. I want to try to minimize this to about 5 minutes, just kind of set the stage. It's going to be a live demonstration. Our app working against Textract OCR-as-a-Service, AWS Textract OCR-as-a-Service real time, working against JDE real time, against JDE logic and the data in JD Edwards and a number of different scenarios. I am going to be joined after I'm done with the slide deck, the demo portion, by Suman Prasad and Ben Tyrell, my associates. So let me get started with the slide presentation. Like I said, I'm going to be very, very brief because we're going to send everybody this slide. Kelly will right after we're done. But KRise has been around since 2004, addressing the JD Edwards ERP landscape with value add solutions, custom solutions, what we call pre-built. This is a pre-built. In other words, we take a best practices model as a starting point, and it could be modified to any degree from that point. We're a cloud software company using AWS, although we do support any private or public. We prefer AWS from the perspective of updates and such. Companies that want to take ownership of the project management or development, we give them the keys. Full e-learning comes with it. A lot of our customer base, though, they have lean IT and they want KRise to create turnkey solutions, which we do. We have all the compliances there. We have large companies, small companies. A little bit more about the compliances. We're a JD Edwards Gold partner. We're both 32 and 64-bit OVI certified. That's very important. We do payments projects, so we're PCI. We're CPA, security controls certified with SOC 2 Type 2. You're seeing that there on the bottom right. And these are slides from Oracle, and Oracle promotes our model, and our model is a low-code platform deliverable. We're not a Java shop, a .NET, a C# shop. We are a low-code, and we've been that way. We're the first vendor to position ourselves in the JD Edwards marketplace, working with over 100 JDE companies on hundreds of projects over the years. But so as an example, the getting to vanilla that you see right there in the middle, this is once again Oracle saying avoid customizations at all costs. Our AP workbench that Ben and Suman will review, it's browser based. It's not anything JD Edwards. We're integrated against JD Edwards through orchestration APIs or business functions, or a hybrid. Sometimes we take a hybrid approach so we can address any tools version, even the folks not on 9.2. We're focused on procurement today with specifically Invoice, AP Invoice, the matching process, a three-way receipt, two-way PO, non-PO vouchers. So that's what we're going to be focused on today, but we have many, many solutions across the business landscape with our customer base. And that's a little bit about our customer base. That's simply some of our JDE companies. With the demo today, real live, realistic, handwritten restaurant receipts, and addressing the variety of AP invoice formats. That's important. And I'm going to touch on that on another slide, how there's zero preparation now. OCR is advanced, and AWS calls it knowledge learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. I'll touch on that. That's very, very important when you factor with most of our customers the number of suppliers and the diversity of the invoices, especially when you're a global company. So this is the a little bit of the demo, what we're going to be going over. Like I said, three-way, two-way, non-PO, media object integration, how the OCR process works. Ben is going to review the workflow as a starting point. and discuss the number of different scenarios. And keep speaking of the use case scenarios, this further details tax, no tax, getting a tolerance, over tolerance price error coming from JD Edwards, wrong vendor, wrong PO, or can't find PO, all those various scenarios. And the workflow is key. This is why companies invest in the KRISE EASYProcess platform with our many pre-built apps and even the custom apps that we have. And once again, Ben's going to thoroughly review the workflow. It's a picture. In fact, it's more than a picture. It's not Visio. It's the IDE workflow, but it shows you exactly how the process and the swim lanes, how it's set up, and it can easily be changed to make it client specific. Now let's talk a little bit more about Textract. Textract is OCR-as-a-Service. Quick setup, and we're going to show you the results. It takes just seconds to get the results back. We're working against, we have a lot of different regions, AWS regions we work against. With today's demo, it's going to be our AWS Ohio East region. And I just want to bring up that this is one solution, this AP invoice, within a number of pre-built solutions that we have addressing the spend, procurement, procure to pay area of JD Edwards. And keep that in mind. If you're interested in other areas of functionality, let us know. This is Textract. So Textract, we do have a Textract app. So outside of AP invoices, we have an app that allows users to work with the raw data, the forms, the tables, to do templating and configuration. But with AP invoices, Textract has something called an Analyze Expense API. And notice on the right-hand side that it addresses any style of invoice or receipt, no templates or configurations required. And that's a key point here, is people want it to work seamlessly against the variety of invoice types that you have. That's what we're going to be focused on from the OCR side. So with that, Ben, you ready to start the demo?
Yep, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, yeah, so before I hop into the application, I'm going to go over the workflow. So I'll go over it at a high level here. Essentially, each request that comes in through this workflow is going to be a new invoice. And these invoices could come through, if you see at the source status, they could come through vendor self-service. They could come over email, network folder, phone scan, drag and drop, manually enter, or they can be split off of an existing invoice. So obviously VSS would go through this VSS route where they can do a PO flip, drag and drop, manually enter, and then submit it to the workflow. But any other route that requires some sort of scanning from AWS goes to the scan status. And this status is dark blue. This means in our IDE that this is a batch status. So this will, all the requests of the status will get processed every minute. And when they do, they get sent to AWS, that invoice expense model or module that Doug was talking about earlier. So it scans it, it passes us back the parameters, the fields that it found on that invoice, and it goes to this validation step afterwards. So this is where we check if the invoice is in the correct format. If the vendor's not found in JDE, the PO is not found in JDE. If we have some invoice number duplicate, the PO and vendor are not matching, or if the PO is closed. Any of these scenarios, it goes to this fix invoice status, and this is where AP can fix the data or perform any of these actions here. But if everything is good at the invoice and the PO is found, it goes down here. And this is where it decides between if it's going to go for three-way matching or two-way matching based on the if the lines on the invoice are stock or non-stock. So if three-way matching, it goes to this waiting for receipt status, and this is dark blue. Once again, because it's a batch status, so it'll continually wait for the PO receipt to be performed at JDE. Once it is, it tries to match the invoice lines to the PO lines. If that can't be done, if there's some discrepancy between unit price and quantity, and it can't match them completely one-to-one, it goes to three-way manual match, and this is where the AP team would go in, manually match those lines together, and then resubmit. But once everything's good, it goes down to the status down here where it actually creates that three-way voucher in JDE. So here, if everything's good, it'll terminate the request. If the invoice is over tolerance, it goes to this three-way over tolerance status where that over tolerance can be approved and sent back to JDE, or we can request a PO change from some user, and that change would have to be made in JDE. Along the same route, there's a config, and when you enable it, you can enable logged vouchers. So this is where immediately after the invoice comes in, it'll log that voucher in JDE, and then wait for the receipt and perform the rest of the process. And once everything is good, the invoice is matched to the PO, it distributes the logged voucher in JDE. Going down here to two-way matching, this is essentially going to be the same process. The only difference here is a two-way match requires approval by default. So it requires approval by the original requester in JDE. So that's where this status comes into play. And once that's approved, it requires two-way approval by department. And this follows an approval route that's set up in the application. Once that invoice is completely approved, it finally creates the two-way voucher in JDE. All right. And then if no PO is found, if we submit this as a non-PO voucher, it comes down here. And this also requires some approval based on an approval routing. And once that's fully approved, it creates the non-PO voucher in JDE. And so that's the workflow at a high level here. I also just want to go over, since Doug was mentioning this is the IDE. This is very customizable. Everything you see here is going to be reflected in the application that I'm going to show you. One piece of customization here is at each status, there are 4 icons. These 2 icons on the left are the arrival event and complete event. So the arrival event corresponds to logic that runs when a request reaches the status. So you can think like sending out notifications to approvers and things like that. And the complete event is logic that runs when a request leaves the status. So this can all be customized here. There's also actions and conditions. So this defines what a user can perform on the status. So these are the actions that AP can perform at this fixed invoice status. They can assign to business, they can assign to vendor, they can reject, rescan, and so on. And conditions are going to be the branches coming off of the status. So that's, same thing. These are one-to-one in this case. And then there's also actors. That's this last one here. If we want to assign the status to a specific user or group of users, here's where you would do it. So you can assign it to the original requester, you can assign it to a specific user, a roller group, or have it based on some user property. And once this is defined, only these users can perform actions on the status. Okay, and with that being said, I do want to go over one more thing, and that's the roles. So the roles for the application are all configured in the IDE as well. These kind of define the security for the application, so different users can have different authorizations, which contain different roles, which control your access to different pages if things are read-only, or you can edit them. So that's things like site-wide configurations, viewing history, being able to edit an invoice here, have specific access based on company, and so on. That's all defined here. So I'll go ahead and log in as Vanessa Hudson into the application. So I'll log in. And Vanessa Hudson is an AP corporate admin user, and this type of authorization has access to all of the roles. So we'll see all the pages when we log in. So we have this invoice menu here. This is the AP workbench and the invoice feeder, where we'll do most of our work. We have some reporting pages here. We have some basic inquiry pages here. And then we have the settings menu, which I'll go over a little in depth here because this has to do with the setup of the application. So this is things like vendor preferences. These will be applied when an invoice comes in and it's detected to have a certain vendor. We can do some specific things in the workflow based on that vendor. And that's things like making the invoice number unique automatically. We can define them as a non-PO vendor, so they'll always be submitted as a non-PO voucher. We can consolidate the invoices to one line, and with this, you'll have to define a remark and an account number for that line. So these are some different vendor preferences that you can define. There's also configurations. So these are things like some default values, like account number, business unit, so on. Things like three-way matching conditions, two-way matching conditions, valid email extensions, things like that. There's approval routings. So this is where you can define approval routes. As mentioned, two-way matching and non-PO vouchers will require some sort of approval. So this is where you can assign the approval to certain users and set their approval amounts. And all these approvals are going to be based on business unit. And yeah, there's also delegation. You can define some company constants and also scan preferences. And this is if a value from Textract needs to be changed to something else based on a certain vendor. But that's where all that setup is. So I'll go back to the home screen here. And the next thing I want to show is this invoice feeder. So this defines the methods that you can take to upload invoices to the workflow. There's this manual upload up here, just a drag and drop upload, and this will send it straight to the workflow. There are network queues. So this is folders that are sitting. It's essentially folders where you can drop PDFs into this folder, and then this system will automatically pick them up and submit them to the workflow. And there's also email queues. So these are monitored inboxes where you can just send over an email with an invoice attached, and the system will automatically pick that up and submit it to the workflow. And with that being said, I can go into the AP workbench. And so this is essentially a screen that will show all invoices that have been submitted to the workflow. So we can see some basic information on each of these files here. You can see the file name, the status that this invoice is at, and some notes about the status as well. We can see some basic information here: vendor number, currency total. This information's being picked up by AWS and passing it back. We go over to the right here. We have an option to download the invoice file. We can edit the invoice, and we can also view the history. So if I open up the history window, this will show up at the top here a workflow history diagram. So this corresponds to exactly what I went over here. You can kind of follow the path that this invoice took. And when I hover over any of these, you can see comments, you can see who did these actions, date timestamps, and duration for each status. You can get a more detailed view down at the bottom here as well. And then there's also the OCR data, and this will show you the invoice itself, and there'll be boxes around everything that AWS has scanned and sent back to us. All right, and I'll also show the edit invoice page before I go into an example here. And just for this example, so this is where you'll work with your invoices, you'll work with the data. We have some icons up here that do some different things, which I'll go over later in the demo. We have the workflow history diagram. Some basic information up here, once again, coming from a lot of these fields coming from Textract, like invoice number, invoice date. Scrolling down here, you can see all of the lines that were picked up on the invoice. So you can edit any of these fields here. Down at the bottom, there's comments and notes, so you can pass back comments from user to user that's working with these invoices. There's a calculator, which you can use to kind of easily sum up some of these values. We have the actions at the bottom, which once again also correspond to the workflow, the available actions. This one is at fixed invoice status, so we can rescan, assign to vendors, so on. All these buttons are down here. And then down at the very bottom is the invoice image. And so once again, this will show the invoice and boxes around everything that AWS scanned. And there's also some annotation features as well. So we can do things like circle things. We can add notes in here. We can add arrows, things like that. And these annotations will save, and other users will be able to see them as well. All right, so I'll go over to the invoice feeder and I'll put through the first example here. So let me grab this PDF. Yep, so this is the first example we're going to show. I'm going to upload it and click on upload for scan here. And then if I go to the AP Workbench, we'll see that that file has been uploaded to the workflow and it's sitting at the scan status. Like I said, this is a batch status, so we'll have to wait for this to be picked up and sent to AWS. But if I hover over this, it'll say that the status will be automatically processed by the workflow batch engine. So while that's scanning, I'll open up this PDF so you can get an idea of what we're scanning. So this is an invoice from Parts Emporium. We have a PO number on here, 5047. So this is a PO that exists in JDE, and it has been received already. We have a couple lines here totaling to 1585.86. So let me refresh this list, see if it got scanned. It looks like it was scanned, and it's doing the validation currently, and it finished the validation. So now it's waiting for receipt. So in this case, if I'm just looking at the workflow here, we can see that it passed all validation, it found the PO, and now it's waiting for receipt. So that's exactly what's happening here. So it's going to periodically check JDE for that receipt, and it has been received, so it will find it. But once it does find it, it will submit it as a voucher in JDE. Or sorry, it'll do a three-way matching in JDE. But you can also see here, it picked up the PO number, it picked up the invoice date, everything from that PDF as well. Yeah, for these batch statuses, we also have these buttons up here to kind of run them manually as well, if just so they can be processed right away. But that one disappeared from our list. So if I click on show completed, we'll see it entered the status complete. So it gave us back a JDE document number. So I'll take this into JDE here. And we'll go to P0411. All right, and if we search on that, we can see that voucher is in JDE. For the amounts that were invoiced, this example matched one-to-one with what we had on the PO. So this one had no issues. We could see it also attaches the invoice as a media object attachment here. Yep, going into the detail, we'll be able to see, it did match it to the invoice, and we have all the details here as well. So I'll go ahead and reverse this and put through the next example. Let's go back to the invoice feeder. And we'll upload this one. Once again, we'll go to the AP Workbench. For this one, I'm just going to run the scan manually up here instead of waiting for it. And this is the invoice that we're putting through. So this is essentially going to be the same here. The only difference is the freight charge of $11.99. The other one was 0. So, yep. So we can see it did scan and it passed validation once again, and it's sitting at waiting for receipt. So I'll run that status manually as well. All right, and yeah, once again, it disappeared from our list, which means entered status complete here with document number 4311. And this one had that freight charge, and you can see it voucher those first 2 lines and then added a third line for that $11.99 charge. Yep, and going into the details, you can see the account number, which is just the default freight account that we have, and it matched it with $11.99. So once again, I'll reverse this, and we'll go into the next example. Go into the invoice. Okay. Yeah, go back to the AP workbench and see that at the scan status. Yeah, and this is the invoice that I'm uploading now. So this is once again going to be the same thing as that first example, but this one has an incorrect vendor name and an incorrect vendor address. So the way that it finds the vendor number, you might have noticed in those examples that we had, it had a vendor number here. Obviously, this wouldn't be sent in by the vendor themselves because this is a value that you have in JDE. So it uses some logic here based on the vendor name and the vendor address, cross-references that with the address book in JDE and finds that address book number. If these values are incorrect, there's really no way to match this. So that's why this one entered the fixed invoice status. It didn't pass validation because the vendor was not found. So this is the first exception that we're running into here. If we click into it, we'll have to correct this. The vendor wasn't found. And you can see we have a blank vendor address number here. So if we know the vendor address number, we can type it in. There's also a lookup here to JDE. So if I search for Parts Emporium, this 4343 is what we're looking for here. So I'll just click on that. It pulls in the value. And then we can click on retry, which will retry the validation. Yep, and you can see based on the status history diagram up here, we fixed the invoice, went through validation once again, the PO was found, and it's waiting for receipt. So using that correct vendor address number, passed validation, and it's going through the rest of the statuses that we saw here with the first example. Yep, and so looks like it was completed. We got this JDE document number back, 4312. There it is. So this is going to be the same as that first example. We just had that exception in the workflow. Okay, so for the next example, I'll upload this PDF. Yep, and I'll run that scan. And once again, I'll show the invoice here. So this is going to be a similar invoice, except this is going to be this will correspond to a different PO in JDE 5119. And for this one, you'll see it'll run into a matching error, so it won't be able to match the PO to the invoice. And you'll see why in a second here, but this first line won't be able to get matched automatically. So it looks like it's scanning here. Yeah, while that's scanning, you can also pull up the purchase order in JDE, get an idea of what's going on here. So 5119. Go down to the detail revision. Yep, so you can see the second lines here have an identical unit cost and quantity. Since we don't have anything else to really key off on this invoice here, we only have two lines. We have a line with a net price or unit price of 530 or 530.10 and a unit price of 527.88. So it won't be able to match this first line to anything specific on the PO because these first two lines on the PO are identical. So as AP, we'll have to kind of go in and manually match to whichever line we're looking for. So it looks like it did scan, pass back some information here, found the vendor number, and it's waiting for receipt. So we'll run that part manually. And you'll see, yeah, so it found the receipt, and then it tried to, just going back to the workflow here, it tried to match the invoice lines to the PO, could not match them completely. And so it's at this manual match status. So clicking here, we'll be able to use one of the icons at the top, which is this manually match invoice to PO receipt. And here's where we can see we have the JDE lines for this PO at the very top here, or the unmatched lines. So we have some basic info there. And then down at the bottom, to the left of this line, we have the invoice lines. So we have these two invoice lines. And to the right are the JDE lines that are going to match those invoice lines. So we can see that second invoice line got matched automatically to one of the PO lines, but this first line couldn't differentiate between these two PO lines. So while we're on the screen, I also just want to show you can do multi-PO matching, so we can add additional POs if we need to. So we'll add a couple POs here. It's 5135. And we'll also add 5158. Just to show a couple of examples here. And the way we match an invoice line to a PO line is by dragging the PO line from the top onto here. And then it'll display the variance between that invoice line and PO line. So in this case, it's over $400 plus 77% variance. If I drag this one from 5135 down here, this is under variance. So the PO is more than what we got invoiced for. So that's why that's green there. Yeah, but that's what you would do if you had to match multiple POs to a single invoice. But I'll get rid of these, and what I'll do is just match this second PO line from the original PO to the first line of the invoice. So that's what happened here. We got a variance of 0, which is perfect. So we'll just save that matching. And then once that's matched, we can retry the three-way voucher again. Okay, yeah, and that's what we got here. So yeah, we can see what happened here. Tried three-way matching, went for manual matching, and then it used our matching, or sorry, our manual matching to create the three-way voucher in JDE. We can see this if we search for this document number here. So let's go back into here, and we could see that voucher here. Yep, going in into the details, we can also see the line that we selected to match to that first invoice line is correct here because we dragged over the second line. And the third one was an automatic matching, so that just matched to line 3. Okay, yeah, once again, I'll reverse this. And for this next example, we mentioned different invoice queues. One of them is the ability to send it through a monitored inbox. So that's what I'll do here. So send an invoice over via email. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just attach that and send it over. Yep, and so yeah, so that'll be sent over. I just sent it to this monitored inbox here. It might take a second here for that email to actually get sent over and processed, but once it does, it'll automatically be submitted to the workflow. And one thing we can do too is automatically scan these queues by clicking on this button here. We can also see the records processed for each of these queues. So there have been, here it says 43. It just updated to 44, which means it probably got that new email that I sent in. So yeah, going back to the workbench, we can see, we can see that file that I just uploaded sitting at the scan status. So it was automatically entered into the workflow. So we can run that scan manually once again. And while that's scanning, I can pull up that invoice as well. So once again, it's a Parts Emporium invoice, but this one has an incorrect PO number on it. So this PO number you'll see does not exist in JDE. And that's the validation error that I ran into. So PO is not found. So what we can do is click into this. And here we can see that PO number. As AP, we may not know what the correct PO number is. So here's where we can do some communication with the business. One thing I mentioned was the annotation feature. So going down here to the invoice image, we can put a box around the PO number. We can put a note here. We could say wrong PO number. We can add an arrow to it. We can also add notes. So we can say undersent invoice with incorrect PO number. Say like C sticky notes. And add that here. When we add a comment, we can see who created it and a date timestamp as well. But yeah, after we have these notes here, what we can do is assign it to business. So this lets us assign it to a separate user. We can see, there's a wrong PO number on invoice. We can add a comment here. We can assign it to either a role or a user in the system. So let's select user. We have a user lookup here, so we can kind of view all the users here and select the one we want to assign it to, and then click assign. And now this new user is assigned to the invoice. So I'll go ahead and we'll log out of Vanessa. And we would have gotten this email here that this invoice is assigned to us. So this was sent to Cecilia Watts, the user that I selected. Has some sort of basic information here. It has that comment that we entered. As an attachment to the email, we also have that PDF itself. And they have a link to click here to review. So I'll click here, log in as Cecilia. And this will take us to the AP Workbench. And so the user that I'm logged into right now is a business user. So this is going to be a little more restricted than the corporate admin account. So you can see we don't have access to things like the site-wide configurations or vendor preferences. And the invoices that we see in this list are going to be the invoices that are assigned to us. So we can see that one. The most recent one is the one that we're working with. So click on business. Yeah, once again, we can see the comments. We can see, if I open up the invoice image here, we can see the annotations that have been made. So what we can do here is correct that PO number. So 5047, and add a comment. Corrected PO number to 5047. Yep, and that'll be stored there. And then what we can do is assign it to AP. So this will assign it back to the AP team. So what we'll have to do here is log out of Cecilia. We'll log back in as Vanessa. Go to the AP workbench. Yep, PO is not found. Yeah, so this is the one that we're working with here. And so our job as AP, we'll review that change so we can see that they corrected the PO number to 5047. So that looks good. Now as AP, we can retry the validation with that new PO number. Yep, and it passed validation, we can see. So the PO is found, and now it's waiting for receipt once again. So just to finish this one off, I will run that waiting for receipt job one more time. Oh, it looks like it already went through actually. So we can show completed, and we can see that this one is complete as well. So I'll go back into JDE just to reverse this voucher, but this is essentially going to be the same thing that we saw in that first example. Okay, yeah, onto the last three-way example that I want to show. So that is going to be corresponding to this invoice here. So I'll open that up. I'll run the scan while we're taking a look at this. So once again, essentially the first invoice that we sent through, but this one has a greater unit price for the second line. We have a tolerance in our JDE environment of 5%. So this is going to use those tolerance rule, and it's gonna mark this second line as over tolerance is what we're gonna see. So yeah, so this is waiting for receipt. Yeah, and before it checks that tolerance setting, it's going to go to manual match because it couldn't match that second line to the second line on the PO. So we'll match that here anyway. So once again, open up the matching screen. We'll match these lines manually. You can see it's over 9%, which is what we're expecting. So we can click on save. Once again, retry, which will submit it to JDE. And then you can see it tried to create the voucher in JDE, but it went over tolerance. So here, as you saw before, we have a couple of actions according to the workflow. Yeah, this three-way over tolerance status. So we can approve the over tolerance, we can reject this invoice entirely, or we can request a PO change. Yeah, just for the sake of moving this along, I will just request a PO change. So we can say, please change PO over tolerance. Yeah, and let's assign it to Cecilia. And then the idea is Cecilia will take note of that. She will go into JDE and correct that PO, and then the system will automatically capture that change and then retry that voucher creation. But we've seen that part many times. So I'll move into the next example, which is the two-way example here. So log in. This is going to be an invoice from another vendor. So open that up and we'll run the scan. So this is going to be an invoice from Allen Stationery for 2 items, pen and pencil. Yeah, everything totaling to $144.98. And it does have a PO number on it, 5115. And the lines on the PO are non-stock. So this will go for two-way matching. Yep, and so it did pick up that it was two-way. And if you remember on the workflow, two-way requires approval. First by the original requester of the PO and then by department. So that's what's happening here. It went to James O'Malley, who is the original requester on the PO. So I'll log out, and James would have gotten this email that this invoice needs our approval. So once again, some basic information on the email here. We can click here to go into the portal to approve or reject, or we can approve and reject using the email. So this will pull up a new email, which will just have to be sent out. You can add a comment here. And then once you send that email would get picked up by a monitored inbox and automatically approve this in the portal itself. Yeah, same with reject here. So you can do approve and reject straight from the email. But I'll go ahead and log in to the portal so you can see this process. So we can see that one that we're working with, two-way approval by requester. And as an approver, this user can't edit anything on this invoice, so everything's read-only. This has to do with the roles that are defined for this user. The only thing we can really do is at the very bottom, we can approve and reject. So if I approve, you can see from here, it didn't require approval by department. That has to do with the approval route. It doesn't require approval by department when it's under 200. So this one bypassed that, but it did create that two-way voucher in JDE. So it's 4316. And you can see that here. So it had the 2 lines on the invoice plus that $5.99. There's a freight charge on here as well. Yeah, so you can see that. So it did pick up the freight charge as well. Okay, so I'll reverse that. Yep, so I have a couple more examples that I want to show. So log out of James and log in as Vanessa. And this one, I just want to show another vendor. So this one is going to be a different format than what we saw before. It looks like my Chrome is running a little slow here. Yeah, while we're waiting for that, actually, I'll show the mobile example. So we won't need this for now. So let me plug in my phone here. And this is just to show you can also submit things from a mobile version of the website. Yep, so do this.
Ben, while you look into that, maybe browser restart something, maybe I can go to the questions and handle that. Meanwhile,
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
perfect. Okay, so as he's going through, some browser issues here, I have some questions. I would like to answer them. So one of the question is where are the data stored, whether the supplier or address book or GL. Are we duplicating the data? And the answer is no, we are not duplicating the data. All the lookups that you saw was done real time with inquiry to or with data access from JDE. They are not duplicated into our system. Do we have support for multi-currency invoices? The answer will be yes. We use there was actually a drop down for currency in the beginning, which we default from supplier profile, but that can also be overridden. We also get the currency information from AWS Textract, so we apply that too. And same thing with the date also. We also are capable of handling international date formats. Other question is, how do we handle multiple purchase orders on a single invoice? Okay, that can happen on a single invoice. The supplier might want to get paid from many purchase orders, and that's possible too. If you remember, Ben was showing a drag and drop interface to match an invoice with a purchase order, invoice line with a purchase order line. You can add multiple purchase orders there and match individually with each and every line with different PO lines on a different POs. So technically, it does allow you to do a voucher across different POs, just like you would do it in JDE voucher entry screen. But Kelly, you have any other question on your end?
Ben, were you going to show the phone example?
Yep, I got it up here. I just had to relaunch
Okay.
the app here, but yeah, so here. Okay, yeah, so yeah, this is my phone screen right here. So we do have an EASYProcess app. And this is something that you can register with your user in any application, and it'll show you a mobile version of the website. But the good thing about this is you can just scan things using the camera. You can use like mobile capabilities because you're in a mobile app. So I can just go into the the invoice feeder here. I can upload an invoice using the camera. And then I have an invoice here, which I can just scan, then upload there, click on upload for scan. And then let me pull over this here. So we can go inside the AP workbench from here, and you can see we have that image that I scanned on my phone. So you can see it's not a PDF, it's a JPEG. AWS can handle many different file format types. So we'll run the scan here. We also have that two-way example that I uploaded earlier, so they'll both probably scan in this. So okay. Yep. So it did scan and went to the fixed invoice status here. So it looks like, yeah, the invoice lines and total amount are not matching. So here's where we can use the calculator to help us out. So we can see these two lines here, total of 105, which is what's on the invoice. We can add that with the tax, and then subtract the total, and we can see how much is missing. So we're missing $1 somewhere, which is how the receipt came in. So we can resolve this in any number of ways, but one way, I guess we could just add an adjustment line here. So we'll just add a line, call it adjustment, and make it for $1. So that should fix this discrepancy between the item total and the line total. Or sorry, the line total and the invoice total. So we can retry the validation. Yep, and then it said PO not found, which is what we're expecting. This is a non-PO voucher. So what we can do is change this voucher type to non-PO. And then with the non-PO voucher, we have to define the account numbers here, which we have a lookup for. So we can select the business user that we want to use here. I search for the account name. I can just use this meals one here. I just copy it to all lines. And then once again, retry the validation. So we define that this is a non-PO voucher, so it should go all the way down to non-PO voucher. So it created that non-PO voucher in JDE, and it reached the non-PO voucher end, which meant that everything went through. So I'll go into JDE once again. To search for that 4317, and you can see it's submitted here, both lines on that handwritten invoice, including the adjustment line here for $1, and distributed the tax among all the lines. So that's how it looks like in JDE. The last thing that I want to show is just the other example here that I uploaded. So this was a two-way example. This one is also going for approval, but this is just to show a different vendor format and how it picked up the items. So this is completely different. Like Doug mentioned, AWS is completely, you don't have to use any templates or anything like that. So none of this was set up, but it picked up all the fields here. So if we go inside of it, we can see, those lines were picked up, the header information was picked up, the vendor number was picked up automatically. And while we still got a minute here, I'll also upload another example here. We'll run the scan. So this is, just to showcase another, the AWS capabilities. So this is a multi-page invoice. We have items that span across 3 pages here, with the total amount being on the final page. And it did reach the fixed invoice status because the PO was not found, but there was no PO number on here, so that's correct. But if I go into it, we can see it picked up all of the lines across all of the pages. Down at the bottom, it found that total on the very last page. And everything was scanned correctly here. So yeah, I think that's just about everything I wanted to show here. Yeah.
Benny, I have.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a few more questions. I will take that, and this will be a good time if any of you wants to type the answer. We can or raise the hand. Kelly can unmute. So another question I have is, how is it connecting to JDE? Is there any third-party tool like MuleSoft or something is needed to connect to JDE? The answer is no. Our product has built-in connector to JDE. That's something been doing for more than 15 years, as Doug said. And we use business function interop, or we can also use orchestration. In both cases, we directly connect to JDE as part of the product. No third-party tool needed. What is the average implementation time? Generally, we'll say, as you see, it's a very pre-built and configurable product. We expect 5 to 10 weeks for a general implementation to take.
And Suman, let me interject there. We do have a scoping document, a very detailed scoping document for those of you that want this additional detail. I can pass along that, and obviously we can have any number of direct discussions with your company. So
another question, Doug, I have, can it handle TIFF file? You saw it did JPEG. AWS does support TIFF files, so yes, it can scan the TIFF file too. In terms of scanning, we use AWS Textract. and it's a very advanced OCR cloud-based platform.
And then one last comment is with the mobile capabilities. We're both on the Android Google store and the Apple, so we address both phones. You'll find EASYProcess on both of those stores for the mobile functionality. Suman, was that it with questions?
Yes.
All right. I want to thank everybody for attending. Once again, we encourage you to follow up with us. We're a very easy company to work with. We remove a lot of the vendor vetting uncertainty with things like proof of concepts, where we'll set it up and allow you to work with your own data. A lot of people are skeptical of software demos like this. And if you take it to a point where we're working against your instance and your data, that almost always removes that uncertainty and risk associated with investing in a product. Like I said, we have many other adjunct products, pre-built products. So please contact us. We we'd love to have a dialogue with you. That information will come from a follow-up email that Kelly is going to be sending out. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye now.